Welcome to the Embodied Wisdom Podcast.
Okay, so Brent, what was the pivotal moment in your journey that shifted you from a tech-driven guy at MIT to embracing the profound world of the healing arts?
I wish I could say it was some profound inner guidance or some kind of miracle revelation, but it wasn't. It was really more than anything desperation.
Desperation.
That I was at my wit's end. I thought I didn't have any other choices. And I guess when there's an old saying, if your only shot is a long shot, you take it. Because I never thought I'd do anything like this, to be a spiritual teacher, teaching people intuition and all that kind of stuff. If you had told me that 25 years ago, I would have thought you were nuts.
Yeah.
Had you told me 23 years ago, I would have been, yep, that makes perfect sense. Because when I came out of college and grad school, I was supposed to be a tech superstar. I was a video game developer, website programmer. I had done some really awesome stuff in grad school at MIT. And really, I thought that was going to be my journey. And I expected when I started on it, I figured, well, I'll leave grad school, I'll recruit some friends, we'll start a tech company. We'll work really hard for a couple of years and then maybe sell it for millions of dollars and then perhaps retire to some tropical island. So
hmm
that was the master plan. But as you
Ooh,
can
that
guess,
sounds
yeah,
good.
there's no tropical island background here. And there's that old joke. It goes like this. How do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans.
Yeah.
So that was me telling you all my plans when I was a young man. Things went really well at first with the companies. I created the very first website for the Sony PlayStation. I did the first website for Nissan Motors, Disneyland. We were doing some really high profile projects and we created a revolutionary video game. But I was bootstrapping two tech companies basically on my back and working 80, 90, 100 hours a week. And long story short, before we made our millions, my body totally broke down and I had horrendous chronic pain. I had difficulty even doing basic things like getting dressed or eating dinner. And at first, I just went to doctors. I figured, the doctors will know what to do. They'll give me something or whatever, right? So, long story short, after 3 years of intensive physical therapy, I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse.
Hmm.
And uh, it was it totally blindsided me. Right when I thought I was on the track to get better, it was because I had finally gotten to see the head doctor at the Curlin Job Clinic, which is one of the top physical therapy clinics in the world. And I thought, wow, this guy he'll be able to save me. And when I went in to see him, it was a very short meeting because he just said, well, I'm sorry, son, there's nothing I can do here. You're always going to be in pain and you'll never be able to work. And I was so dumbfounded, I didn't even have words. And the last thing he said to me, he said, son, do you got somewhere you can go and someone can take care of you until you die? And I was 27 years old.
What?
Yep.
You
He
were
said,
27?
yep, said my injuries were so severe that my body had been through so much, he didn't see any chance of me recovering. And on the way out, I was told that please don't come back. They can't be wasting their limited resources on impossible cases like me. So I was recommended for lifetime disability when I was in my 20s. And when I told my best friend about this and business partner, I figured he'd have my back. He'd be like, hey, Brent, don't sweat it. It's another setback. We'll get through it together, something like that, right? Instead, I didn't know this at the time, but he had been secretly dating the woman I was crazy in love with. So when I told him what the doctor had told me, he was just like, well, sorry, if you can't work, you're out. And you got to remember, these companies were my idea. It was my education, my hard work, my genius that went into them, not his. He was just the money guy. And so, long story short, he took the companies from me. There was a lot of legal shenanigans, multiple lawsuits, and I was left living with soul-crushing chronic pain, living with my parents, being told that there's no chance of me ever recovering or working or having a normal life. So, how's that for desperation?
Dang.
And
Brent, that is so wild.
that
I
was
mean,
the level of desperation I
you're
needed.
27, you're not even 30 yet, and
Nope.
you've been given this news. Hey, go, where can you go so you can, just
Basically, just go sit on a couch, watch TV till you die.
that is wild.
Yep. And
I can't even imagine. That is desperation.
yep. And on top of that, I also lost my lifelong best friend
Wow.
and the woman that I thought maybe would be my wife.
Now,
So
were
it
you
was,
dating her or did you just like,
we had been dating casually,
okay,
but things were getting more serious.
okay.
And I had no idea she had been two-timing me with my best friend and business partner.
Two timing. I haven't
Yep.
heard that expression in a while.
Yeah,
Two
well,
timing. Dang.
maybe I'm dating myself,
That is
but yeah,
so wild.
it
Okay,
was
so here you
heartbreaking.
are, you're 27,
Yep.
your world has crashed down, and you're like the opposite of everywhere you thought you'd be at
Yep.
age 27. You're
That's why it was,
wealth,
I
stripped
really
from
thought I'd
your
be a
passion.
superstar. I'd have money, career choices, you know. I at least thought I'd be
Okay.
able to drive my car an hour at a time. But I was in so much pain, I was very limited in where I could drive.
It's just so wild because all this pain came on just because of the limited amount of rest. Like what else
Well,
do you
it's
think is
funny.
going on?
An obvious part of it was the overwork,
Yeah.
that I was working, 80, 90 to 100 hours a week all the time, no vacations, no breaks. I didn't
Mhm.
take great care of myself. I didn't have a great chair. The ergonomics weren't great, but I just thought I'd power through it. But it's so funny that you ask, well, what was really there? There was a straw that broke the camel's back, and it was emotional.
Yeah.
Though it took me years to see it. It was uh, a girlfriend I had had at MIT that was supposed to be moving out to LA, and we had reconnected. And I was really excited. And I thought, wow, even though everything else is crap, maybe, she'll be the love of my life. And the day she was supposed to move out, she dumped me. And that was the day that the pain hit me like a ton of bricks. I
Mm.
remember I had had some issues. I was stiff. I'd have pain in my elbow, my wrist, I had had some low-level symptoms. But that day, I remember I walked out to my car to drive home and I took out my keys. This again was back in the old days when you actually had to put your key in the car, right?
I still have a
Turn.
car like that. Okay, Brent.
Yes.
So,
So,
wow.
and I went to, and I couldn't get my car open because my hands were shaking so badly. I was like, whoa. And I made a note. I'm like, wow, I should call a doctor. There could be something wrong here. And so it was this enormous chronic physical stress. But it wasn't until the emotional piece hit me that everything collapsed like a house of cards.
It totally makes sense because, you men, you guys are programmed out of your emotions. Not that you
Hmm.
don't have them, but whenever I take a man through a process, it's so much more challenging because it's as if they can't get that plug in to their emotional system.
Yep.
So all this stuff that you said later on, you figured out that emotional piece that made so much more
It
sense
was
to you.
huge. Yep. Though
So here
at
you
the
are,
time, I was just hopeless. I mean, I started day
right?
drinking. I was using drugs. I was suicidal.
Yeah, you were like,
I was a train
get
wreck.
get me out of this. Get me out of this. Okay, so then
What
what
pulled me out of
shifted?
it temporarily was I had a buddy get me into alternative medicine.
Yeah,
And he thought, "Hey, Brent,
psychedelics.
not at the start. That came much later.
Okay.
But I started with acupuncture and herbal cleanses. I started going to chiropractors, getting cranial sacral work, doing yoga and Pilates.
Okay.
So I got into, very deep into alternative medicine, and I was really excited at first because I thought this can do it. I recognized that, hey, Western medicine is great for a lot of things, but it really is terrible with these chronic degenerative kind of conditions. And there may be a solution. Just because the one doctor doesn't know how to do it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Hmm.
Because remember, you're talking to a guy who, when I talked about my video game, everyone told me it's impossible, too difficult technically. And I made it and showed them, hey, this can actually be done.
Yeah, you don't take no for an answer.
Yeah. So
Forget about it.
I really believe that the alternative medicine was going to do it. But to make a long story short, 5 years of intensive therapy with alternative medicine, I didn't get any better. I just kept getting worse.
Hmm.
And of course, you mentioned the emotional part. That's the part that I didn't look at because I thought it was irrelevant. I thought emotions, they're just kind of annoying. They're in the way. You power through them, you push them aside, right? And you get your job done. And so I was
No.
doing years of all this treatment just on my body, all these
Yeah.
physiological treatments, not realizing that the real wound where the care was needed was more emotional, psychological, spiritual.
Yeah.
And at the end of that period, I ended up having an experimental surgery that left my right arm paralyzed. And that was a whole new level of disability. And that's when I hit rock bottom. And that's what it took to get me to try energy healing. That I could kind of see acupuncture or like herbal cleanses or nutrition. That kind of made sense to me. But something using the power of the mind to make a shift in someone else's body when they're 30 miles away, I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was desperate. And I ended up doing energy healing because my Aunt Lauren, her best friend, Terry, had gotten really sick and almost died, and found this method of energy healing that not only did it save her life, she walked away from this amazing career in finance to be a full-time healer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought she was nuts. I'm like, she was a Wharton School MBA, top of her class, made lots of money, like, had an incredible career in front of her. And she just walked away and said, I'm going to be a professional energy healer. And it's kind of funny. I was her first professional client.
Oh, wow.
Yes, number one. And I only went because not only did Lauren offer to pay for my session, she said she'd also take me out to lunch. And I was like,
Win-win.
all right,
Was
because
she
she'd
going to
been,
feed you as
yeah,
well because you were minus your hand, your dominant
pretty
hand?
much. What we learned is I could go to we used to go to the soup and salad buffet. And that was something that was actually easy for me to do with one hand. So I could do a whole interview on living one-handed, but back to the,
I think that's a great value to learn that.
yeah,
Bob Proctor teaches that.
I learned to do everything except write with my left hand. Of the things I mastered that was the most difficult, I'd say shaving.
Oh.
That took a lot of practice. Never got writing. I mean, I can write poorly with my left hand.
Oh.
But I decided to go see Terry. And, I had no expectations. I was just there for a free lunch. And so she talked to me about the power of the subconscious and said that the reason I couldn't get better was I was full of subconscious blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's a nice theory, but, she asked me a lot of questions about things that had happened in my life and, all the things I was feeling, right? And I was like, yeah, emotions, feeling, whatever. But anyhow, after about an hour, she did this block clearing with me and then said, we're going to heal your arm. And I'm thinking, you and what army, right? And so I remember she kind of went into a trance and she closed her eyes. And about 30 seconds in, there was this loud cracking and popping inside my elbow. And I remember I took my arm and moved it. And I said, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I could move my arm again. And that's when Terry was like, yeah, it's called energy healing. You want to learn? And I was like, hell yeah. So it was that moment that turned this very skeptical, rational, too much in your head engineer and scientist into someone who was not only open to this work, but excited about it.
Wow.
But I want to be honest with everyone because I don't want people to get the wrong takeaway. It wasn't like all my problems got solved in an hour. The issue with my elbow from the surgery did instantly heal. That really happened. But I still had all this chronic pain and problems. So it's not like I was totally healthy an hour later. It
Right.
took me years of work to dig out of the hole I was in. But that's when I hit rock bottom, and that's when things started to get better.
That's
And
beautiful.
that was back in 2003. And
Yeah.
I've been doing this as my, you know, uh,
Yeah. And
profession ever since.
I'm dying to know about your process. Like, everything is energy. This is my take
Sure.
on energy. Everything is energy, emotions. Everything at the base of it is energy. So energy healing could be a vast variety of things. I
It could
mean,
mean almost anything,
it
couldn't it?
could mean almost anything. So I'd really love to get into your specific modalities
Mhm.
and to really like dissect it a little bit, find out why it works, find out how it works, all the things. So where do we start?
So I'm going to offer a little bit of terminology
Okay.
so that we can have a meaningful discussion because what I've created here is a little outside the bounds of what most people would understand or be comfortable with.
Yes.
So I like to think about self-improvement as a form of technology. It's how you use your consciousness, your mind, what's on the inside. And I would roughly divide it into three generations. Kind of like how we had PCs and now we have smartphones, right? There was the internet. And in the most primitive, the first generation technologies, those would be your typical law of attraction, like The Secret. They'll tell you to think positive and join a mastermind and say your mantras, make a vision board. And that's
Mhm.
all well and good. But the fact is, for most people, it doesn't move the needle. If my mother had cancer and all she did was make a vision board, I'd be upset and be like, no, mom, that's not going to be enough. And the formal studies done on the law of attraction have shown it's pretty miserable. That about 1% of people who use this stuff ever feel they get any kind of meaningful result. So it's moving us in the right direction. But things like The Secret and Think and Grow Rich, there's clearly more to it than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that leads us into the second generation. That's what I learned from Terry when I had the healing on my elbow. And the big difference is with the second generation, we know how to directly address and work with the subconscious mind. So that's a lot of what we're doing here, is learning how to harness and direct the power of the subconscious. And Terry was correct when she said the reason I couldn't move my arm was subconscious blocks. I just didn't believe it because it seemed ridiculous. But she said there was literally some kind of emotion and trauma stuck in my elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to go through this process of question and answer and block clearing to get it to release. And then when it did, my elbow went crack and I could move it again. It was crazy. And so with the second generation, we're getting into things like hypnosis or NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, Psych-K, things like that.
Those are the technologies I use.
Yeah, those are, and it's powerful stuff because it has the ability to identify blockages and issues in the subconscious and to fix it.
Yeah.
And so the second generation technologies are amazing because that's where we start to see a lot of medical miracles.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see people instantly healing from cancer or diabetes or healing from a broken bone in 4 days.
Yeah.
Migraines that instantly heal. We go on and on and on. I've got something like 2,000 testimonials available in my library. So I haven't seen 1 or 2 or 10 miracles. I've seen thousands.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And for the math curious, it's about 1 out of 10 sessions is what it works to. About 1 out of 10 sessions, we see a truly life-changing miracle. But we can't predict it and we can't control it. It's kind of like falling in love. We don't get to choose who we fall in love with, do we? Nope. It's kind of got its own mind, its own timing.
And yet, I'm taken back to like biblical context. That's my background. It's like, ask and it shall be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. Well, that doesn't mean the first time, bro.
Right.
It could be 10 knocks. It could be 10. It doesn't matter. Like you seek it and you will find it, but you got to be diligent about that. So
Absolutely.
I think 1 of 10 is amazing odds,
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I would say that's
what I
phenomenal.
found was that the second generation work is really useful, and I still teach and practice it. If me or my family had something off with our health, emotionally,
I think you
physically,
need all 3 though.
that's exactly where I'd go.
Yeah.
But there were certain things it couldn't work with.
Yeah.
The biggest thing being getting out of your head, getting people out of the mind into feeling. And that translates pretty directly into money and career success. Also, romance relationships too.
Mm-hmm.
That most of us are really jammed up around the second chakra. That's where we tend to be most dysfunctional. And that's the chakra of sensuality.
Yeah.
And it's where creativity and sexuality comes from. It's also where money and prosperity comes from.
Now, do you think that's both male and female? Because I feel like we have very separate blockings.
They're different,
Yeah.
but the nature and how they affect the body is almost identical.
Okay.
Sort of like, male and female brains are different, but
Well,
ultimately it's all the same chemicals coursing through it.
But meaning that I've been told that men's energy comes down and women's energy comes up. So we go from heart to head, where men go from head to heart.
I'd say that's more about your
Energetically.
energetic wiring than physical gender. That what we find is about 90% of us are wired energetically to match our physical gender, about 10% are cross. And
That
there's
would
nothing
make
bad about
sense
that.
these days.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, almost all of us have known a couple that got along pretty well where he had the feminine and she had the masculine.
Yeah.
So that works just
Yeah.
fine. We see it in gay couples. One of them has the feminine and one of them has the masculine.
Right.
So as long as both energies are represented and balanced, it'll work. All the
Right.
rest of the factors are less important. But what I found with the second generation, people would really be stuck in terms of charisma, presence, money, financial success.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that you'd see occasional wins with the second gen technology, like doing consciousness work,
Right.
but it was a lot less than health issues.
I see.
And there were a lot of people like me that worked on it for years and years with the second gen. And for example, what it did for me was, it was crazy. The amount of money I started making as I went full time into healing was almost identical to how much money I made as an engineer
That's
years before,
wild.
right? So it got me back to where I was, but it couldn't move me forward. And I just thrashed around there for several years. And that's when I discovered the third generation,
Uh-huh.
which I didn't even know existed. And
Yeah.
that's one of the challenges is how do you talk about something that's not only something people don't know much about, but they don't even know it exists. Imagine if you took a cell phone back to 1930
Yeah.
and went on, and we're talking to people going, well, this is how it works. They'd be like, what? Are you crazy? They'll probably lock you up. And this all happened because I had another major life crisis. I think it's kind of unfair that some of us have to go through multiple dark nights of the soul. I thought after the first one, I would be clear for a while, but I went through several more. And one of them happened after learning from Terry, I was able to reduce my pain a lot. I was able to come off disability, even though I was told it was impossible. I was able to start a business, making money, doing healing, teaching classes. I started writing books, making DVD videos, was having a lot of success with people.
DVDs?
DVDs. Yes, this was like 2005, 2006.
Oh, it's been a while.
So yeah, oh yeah, I've been doing this full time since 2003. So
Wow.
I've seen many generations of technology come and go.
Yeah.
And it was great, but I was still suffering on the inside.
Mm.
I came off disability, but I was still stressed about money. Always felt there wasn't enough. Part of me was deeply still trying to control the world with my mind. And that's when it all had to fall apart again. And to make a long story very short, I fall crazy in love with this woman who totally rejected me and tore my heart out. Right at the same time, I hired a criminal to be my financial advisor. And he not only robbed me blind of every cent I had, he left me $1 million in debt. And it was funny that it was a week in 2008 that on Monday, I declared bankruptcy. And that was emotionally a really difficult time for me. The next day, I had my first movement session with Carl Wolf, the man who became my mentor. And I didn't think much of it, but it really happened that way. I met him the day after I declared bankruptcy. And long story short, what had happened was I had been working with a life coach for a couple of years. And he eventually, after doing over 100 hours with me, he kind of threw up his hands and said, Brent, I don't know what to do with you. You're such a head case. None of my tricks work. I can't work with you anymore, but I'm going to kick you up the food chain to the master. His name is Carl. And I was supposed to meet Carl down by the beach to do some kind of healing process involving rollerblading, which seemed kind of strange, right? I'm
I
like,
love
huh?
rollerblading.
And so I went down day after I declared bankruptcy, met Carl, and it's a true story. I had spent my last $500 on this session with Carl. And so I was desperate. And basically, he had me rent rollerblades, and then he had me skate in the parking lot for about 20 minutes, and he videotaped me. And then we sat in his car and watched the videotape, and he just kind of criticized me. And then he sent me home. And I was pissed. I remember I called my life coach. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? How would you convince me to spend all this money on this crazy old guy who had me rollerblade in circles, criticized me, and sent me home, right? And
That
I,
sounds
it
crazy.
was totally crazy. And I remember his name was Brian. And I said, Brian, I'm pissed. And Brian said, Brent, I get it. Carl's out there. Even for someone who's a healer and deep into the new age, Carl's still way out there. But he said, do me a favor, give it 3 weeks. And he said, if nothing shifts in 3 weeks, let me know. We'll try to make it right. I'm like, okay. So I marked my calendar 3 weeks out, call Brian again, chew his butt off, get my money back. And it didn't take 3 weeks. It didn't even take 3 days. That by Thursday night, I had seen a huge surge in my business that made no rational sense at all. And long story short, in 3 days, I had made over $50,000. And I was able to
Wow.
pay off all my remaining credit card debt and start
What
investing
did
money
this
again.
guy do to you?
That's what I'm here to talk about.
I mean, because what did he do to you? Like,
And
what did he say
that's
in
the
the?
crazy thing. He didn't seem like he did anything. That's why I was upset. I was expecting him to like tap on my body like EFT, or maybe like hook up, electrodes from a machine because I'd done stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or at the minimum, I wanted to smack me in the forehead and yell hallelujah. I'm like, come on, man, at least give me that, right?
Demons out.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
But
gosh.
no, and I learned later, and that's why we call what we did was the term now we call it movement feedback holography. And what it means is first, it's about physical movement. So it's a healing process involving physical movement more so than talking. So it's done.
If I
Mhm,
go out on my rollerblades today, Brent, now I get
mhm.
up out there and I just roll around. That's it.
Now, if you have someone that knows how to connect you into the quantum field
Oh,
and synchronize your brain waves and lower them to a theta state while you're moving and reprogramming the neurology, then yes.
wow.
And the thing was, Carl was doing a lot with me, but it was a meditative state. It was in a meditative entrainment. And I was such a head case, I was not sensitive to it. I didn't realize anything was happening.
So it wasn't in his feedback in the car.
That was a part of it.
Oh, okay.
The feedback, along with the meditative entrainment, watching the video, that's what created the healing. And it's unlike anything I had done before because everything I'd done before was either first gen, meaning like The Secret, Law of Attraction, masterminds, vision boards, mantras,
Very
all
head. Yeah.
very head, very language based, a lot of words.
Mm-hmm.
The second gen also very language and word focused.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the modalities will use muscle testing and state beliefs and check your body against, how your field responds to different substances,
Right.
but still very language and mentally focused. What Carl was doing is very physical and visceral. The words is just a small piece of it. It's a combination of him learning how to hold the energy and sort of reconnecting you to the space around us. That's what we call chi or ki or prana or life force or flow. And that's why this work is the only thing I found that can really make a difference in terms of your presence, your charisma, your ability to really project yourself into space.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something magical that as you get more present, things tend to click and fall your way. That
So I want to know what you do to hold space for that. What is
um
it? What is your process while
yes,
the because I'm sure you do it slightly different than, hey, get on some rollerblades, let me watch you and
I do, but it's very similar, except
okay.
mostly I work online through Zoom.
Okay.
And if I could get people to effectively rollerblade on Zoom, I would do it. But we have other movements we use, like the shaking and the hand scooping,
Mm.
that are more amenable to being on a camera in a remote environment that do sort of the same thing. But when I get together with my students for residential intensives, we do maybe twice a year here in Las Vegas. Absolutely, we're rollerblading and ice skating.
Oh, I want to do
Yes,
that.
because it's one of the better movements because you cannot balance in your mind. You have to balance through feeling.
Yeah.
So when you watch someone rollerblading or skating, you can see their energy patterns and it's a combination of a meditative entrainment. Some call it beaming or consciousness shifting or quantum field entrainment. And some would even call it calling in your guides or accessing a higher dimension.
No
And
wonder I feel so connected when I go rollerblading.
it's because it forces you to get out of your head
Yeah.
because you can't balance yourself in your head.
Right.
So, and riding a bike would work, riding a skateboard, skiing, snowboarding. These balancing exercises are wonderful for seeing how you present into the world. That tells you the code you're running on the inside.
So then if I'm not having to balance the same way and you're having me shake in front of
Mhm.
you on Zoom, tell me the difference that makes because I'm not
Um,
really having to balance all that.
yeah, the balancing exercises were the first generation of this work
Okay.
because they're the easiest to see the energy, but they're certainly not the only ones. One of the principles we work with is that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yes.
Why is that? Well, you're bringing the same you. So we found that there are other movements you can do that are just as useful in seeing the energy, seeing what's really going on. Because the fact is that we all present into the world in a way that's real, but we have a mental idea that's a little different. and we're lying to ourselves and everyone else all the time.
Oh,
And so,
yes.
for
That's what I
example,
that's what I learned in a leadership course.
mhm,
And I was like, no, I don't present the same thing to everyone. Because, different
right,
people's energy draws out a different side to you.
yep.
It's like what my mom draws out of me versus my kids.
But there is a commonality. There's a common energy that's always there.
That's true.
And so we found the balancing exercises are great, but they're not the only ones that work.
Okay,
There's
what else?
probably 30 different movements I've learned from Carl. Ways to isolate the joints, move your wrists, move your ankles in circles, learning to reactivate the toes so we can feel each toe individually and use our feet more like our hands.
Oh,
Balancing on a slack line is another good one, or a tightrope. So, the number of exercises goes on and on, but it's not about which movement you're doing. It's just that no matter what movement you're doing, you could be driving a car, you could be cutting your dinner, you could be brushing your teeth. There's a common pattern of energy that presents in all of them. That's kind of what we call your core mythology or your personal mythos.
oh.
That's what gives meaning to everything in your life. And our job is to look in there and see, okay, where is it that we're kind of blocked up or plugged up?
That's so interesting because I usually explain that as like a prescription.
Hmm.
When I'm working with my clients, it's like you come in with a certain prescription. That's just all your beliefs, all your pattern, all
Yep.
your programming.
Yep.
And we're literally going to take that off for a minute and we're going to give you a new prescription of your choosing. And
Yes.
that's what we do in our time together. And it's interesting that you say around at every 10, right? So
Hmm.
when you say every 10, do you mean with the same person?
No, typically different people.
Okay. So
And it's
every 10
interesting,
people, out of every 10 people, you'll get one miracle.
usually within the first one or two, three sessions. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's funny, the odds of the miracle are highest in the first session. That's what I found. And I think that's because we have the beginner's mind, aka beginner's luck. And the same
Yeah.
thing happened to me when I had the first miracle with Terry with my elbow. I went back, I wanted 10 more miracles, but it
Yeah.
didn't work
Yeah.
that way. Right.
No. Yeah.
That's what,
That's
what
so
Carl would call
true.
psychological inflation. It's trick played by the ego.
Right.
But yes, typically you'll see most of the people that see the big miracles usually see them in the first two or three sessions. Are there some that come down the line? Of course.
I
Of
just
course.
have to see this. I have to
Of course there is.
experience this for myself.
And that's what I encourage everyone that I would never expect anyone to believe anything just because you heard it on the internet.
Yeah.
What I would take it as this is a possibility, and I want everyone to be an open-minded skeptic. In other words, be open to new ideas and ways of doing things, but don't just believe something because it sounds nice. You need to experience it for yourself. So I
Well,
like
I
to think
just,
of this as like an invitation that, hey,
yeah.
there's this amazing thing you've probably never heard of. This is my experience with it, but that doesn't matter as much. I want you to have your experience with it. See what you feel,
Right.
see what you think. Exactly.
Well, just being in this work for a while, with each there's tons of miracles. I think miracles are everywhere all the time.
Yes.
I see them every time I do a process on someone. I see a miracle of sorts. If they're able to release emotion trapped in their body since childhood, it's like to me that's a miracle.
Sure.
Um, but it's like as long as I've been in this, the more evidence I get that our life is like clay in our hands and we get to mold it.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that when I initially started, but as I've developed on my journey and all these different kind of modalities that I unlock, right? It's like it's more evident to me than ever that I literally have the clay in my hands and I'm molding it. So
Yep.
this is just evidence of that.
As a software engineer, I see it as we're all running around not realizing we can reprogram our own source code.
Yes.
You can write a different program for your experience with money. You
Yes.
can write a different program for your experience with pain.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a very easy process, like my first hour with Terry. Spent an hour, got lunch, my elbow instantly healed. Great. But again, that was just the one symptom of the one surgery.
You said you had your miracle right off the bat. And then it took some time to get the other thing, like all your problems didn't go away right
Right.
away.
Took a lot more work.
Yeah. So I want to know what ended up happening through all of this, healing or restructuring of your DNA, all the stuff. I want to know
Yeah, and
how it played
it
out.
really it kind of culminated when I did Carl Wolf's program called Intensive Life Training,
Uh-huh.
which is a program that was 6 months, $25,000, where you meet every Sunday and do the really deep energy work. And it's funny that when I first heard about it, I thought that's impossible, that's too expensive and too much time.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I worked with Carl for the first year, I started to see, wow, there really is some magic here. And when I finally went through his intensive the next year, the most significant things that happened for me was I started getting invited on telesummits, and I was the #1 bestseller on Lisa Gar's telesummit, and then Darius Bandazat too. And long story short, I more than tripled my income, took myself from being like a small local healer to having a national, international presence. And perhaps even more importantly, I finally found love and started a family years after I thought those ships had sailed. So
Wow.
it really was, profoundly transformational, but it wasn't easy. We do a lot of what's called shadow work.
Yeah.
So you
Well,
have to
yeah,
really dive in
it's
deep
never easy.
and surrender to the truth. But
Yeah.
if you're willing to do that and you have enough motivation, I think you'll be amazed at what happens.
That's
That
so beautiful.
the third generation is really a combination of the meditative piece we call beaming,
You
and
call it what?
we call it beaming is a very
Beaming.
common term,
Okay.
beaming people with energy.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that usually happens is almost everyone within a couple sessions, you start to develop the ability to see auras and energy in past lives with your open eyes. And that's just kind of the symptom that you see. You notice that something started to change. So a lot of it is the meditative piece involving synchronizing your brain waves and lowering them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Great for dissolving pain as well.
Yeah.
Carl would be able to do this with women in labor and more often than not take away all their pain without needing any drugs, which is pretty impressive.
Carl.
Wasn't 100%. I can tell
Right.
you that. I'm not
I could
claiming
have
that.
used him three
Yeah,
times.
yeah. He wasn't 100%, but he had a pretty amazing success rate with that kind of thing. And beyond that, it really changed my life on the inside
Right.
in a weird way.
Now,
That
can you do this on yourself, or do you feel like you need a
um,
third person?
you need a third person at first.
Uh-huh.
Once you have the sense of it, then you are able to do it on yourself.
Okay.
And how long that takes depends on kind of our background and wiring and aptitude. For some people, just a couple sessions with a group and a facilitator, and you can be off and running on your own. Other people need a lot more exposure before it happens. And I was that guy. Took me a lot of groups, but I was relentless. I showed up for everything Carl did for about 7 years until at some point he actually kicked me out.
Was Carl the one that watched you rollerblade and
Yes.
screamed at you? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. He didn't scream at me. He criticized me. And it's a funny thing that
What,
when I
like,
talk about it, I
yeah.
talk a lot about how Carl yelled at me or Carl yelled at this other person. But the truth is, he pretty much never raised his voice. It's just when someone's telling you the deep, dark truth you don't want to hear, you feel like you're getting yelled at.
Okay, like what? What'd he say?
A lot of it didn't make a lot of sense to me at first. He'd say things like, "Oh, you can't feel your the lower part of your left leg, or your right hip's a little bit blind." Some of it was things like that. But there was some magic between the meditative piece and me moving and the feedback he gave that something changed. And it took me years to figure this out. That in terms of the timeline, when I learned the second gen work from Terry in terms of muscle testing, block clearing and healings and manifesting, intuitive readings, a lot of great metaphysical stuff. It was about 18 months from when I took the first training to when I started teaching. So I learned it pretty fast.
Hmm.
That's not a long time. When I worked with Carl, it was 7 years from when I had my first session with him to the point that I was finally comfortable with this enough to start teaching it publicly. So it was a very difficult thing to figure out. And if I could explain it in 3 or 5 minutes, I would. but we're talking more 2, 3 hours. But it is, it's fascinating work because it can do wonderful things that I combine the second and third generation techs in my work.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
There's
Sounds
a
like because you're so dominant left side of your brain, you're
Mhm.
very, very compartmentalized. It probably was very challenging for you to
Oh God,
go
it was
into the
horrible.
right where I'm
It
more
was
dominant
horrible.
right, and for me to
It's
go into
horrible.
the left side, the analyzer, it's like very challenging for me. But it's like challenging those blind spots of like
Right.
looking
But
at
I
the
was
shadows.
really motivated, so I just stuck with it.
Yeah.
That's why it took me 7 years to figure out what he was doing. So be it. If it's going to take 310 sessions, let's get started.
Wow.
It's going to take what it's going to take.
That is so
And it's
neat.
so crazy, even with all that analytical, that it's such an intuitive process.
Yeah.
That in terms of doing the movement and the meditative piece and all that, there's not much to terms of documents. In fact, the entire training is less than 2 hours. After that, it's just a matter of you got to do it. You
Right.
might say it's kind of like playing guitar. The basics of guitar is not that hard, right? One hand you hold the pick, other hand you hold the neck, you press your fingers down on the strings, you make notes, right? Pluck the notes. That's really all there is to it. But look how long it can take to get really good at it. And so it's very much like that, or learning a language is another good metaphor. That
But do you
no
think
one
as
masters a language in a weekend.
but do you think as we ascend, I don't know how much you are into this idea of this splitting of the earth going into the new earth. You
I think the universe is splitting all the time. So
oh, okay.
it seems to be the
You
nature
don't
of
you don't
things.
see a huge ascension in the earth. I mean, if we
Um,
just look at technology in the past
yeah,
100 years versus
it
the
will
50
happen in a
years
way such
before
that
that.
those that are not directly affected will not be aware of it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
you could say it's kind of like the rapture.
exactly.
It's like, yeah, well, my theory, the rapture already happened and we all failed. So
Which time?
yeah, take your pick.
Which time?
But I think the universe is always splitting.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're doing is we're learning to navigate our path through this multiplicity of experiences. And that's the way that miracles work. It's simple. It's higher dimensional physics. It's nothing more than
Yes.
that.
I know. And you know what's so interesting because I grew up in religion and that was so much of my background. And it wasn't until I started opening myself up spiritually,
Mhm.
mentally to the what if, right? Because I was so closed down. It was
Yeah.
like, nope, if it's not in this structure, it's false.
Yep.
And when I started to open that and soften that, it's like all of a sudden things are rapidly changing in my experience. It's just like constant influx and flow in because of my openness. And I'm finding it not difficult to ground, but that's my challenge is like grounding into just this, the present, the here and now, because there's like, I get a conversation with someone like Brent and he blows my mind as to this. I would call it like quantum healing.
Yeah. That's what we call it. We work with the quantum field.
Yeah. It's like,
That this is a
it's
very real, measurable, discernible thing.
right. Not
And it
very
has
different from what
laws and
Jesus did.
properties.
Yeah.
No, I think it's exactly what Jesus did.
Yeah.
It's right there in the New Testament for people that want to read it.
Yeah.
These things and more you too shall do.
Yeah. He
That which
said,
you do unto the least of my brethren, you do unto me.
yeah, and
I
that
mean,
which is
we go
in
on and on.
me, that which is in me is, it's not I that doeth the work, it's the Father
Yeah,
within me that doeth the work.
exactly.
And you shall do greater works than these. Yeah, it's like all that stuff that I mean, my mind is blown right now.
And
I have to experience this, Brent. Like
oh yeah, I think everyone should.
I have to experience this. So,
And we do, I only do a public session once a month,
okay.
but we usually do it the first Monday night of each month.
Okay.
And just, keep an eye on my website. And the group session is the best entry point for most people because that way you can kind of sit and watch and get a sense of it first.
Yeah, and
I
then I'll
can,
get my miracle.
yeah, and I can also do it in one-on-ones,
Uh-huh.
but then you're right on the spot. So there's no hiding or observing or watching. It's, you're on ready to rock. But I think everyone should give it a shot. Now, at the same time, this is not for everyone.
Who do you think it's not for?
Um, People that don't need to get out of their head. If you're already really present and the main thing holding you back is some funky, buggy code in your subconscious, then you probably don't need this. The second gens will work great for you. That's what I found. And the people that are already have that naturally high degree of presence, surrender, flow, that they can experience higher level miracles. I'm also, just my personality. I'm intense. I'm fast paced. I don't have a lot of patience for nonsense or BS or time wasters. And so, do I look like a typical healer? Absolutely not.
No,
I have
not
nothing
in any
against
way.
your typical healer. People expect me to be wearing flowing robes and sandals and have a Buddha statue and,
Yeah,
a bead curtain or
what's up
something,
with
right?
this?
Exactly.
No,
And
that's why I said when you first came on, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is so logical. He's so left brain. And then when everything that came out of you since, I was like, what the heck? These are like two separate things, you
yeah,
know?
and there's a time in life when we just want to kind of have our problems and have someone give us a big hug and tell us it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking for, I'm not your guy. That's not me. I'm here to solve a problem.
Yeah.
So if you're serious about this and you're willing to do the hard work, then I can probably take you to places you might not even know existed.
Yeah.
But, again, I'm impatient. I'm obsessed with the truth. And I really want to drag people to their transformation as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
But
I'm on the same page as you.
but I have learned there is such a thing as too fast.
Yeah.
So that's why I say if you have a high motivation and you're willing to get uncomfortable, I would love to work with you.
Yeah.
But I tend to work best with the head cases because that's me.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're the kind of person, you have some talent, you have some skill, some education, you work hard, you're disciplined, you can make sacrifices, but your life just isn't clicking. You're always the odd man out. Things come close and it's just miss syndrome. That was me.
Yeah.
So if that's you, I think I can bring that missing piece. And I've had a
You described my husband. So left brain.
lot of success with especially professionals that you wouldn't think of being spiritual. So I've had a lot of success with lawyers, with medical doctors.
Uh-huh.
I'm doing a whole program right now specifically for day traders and investors because these are all total left brain logic, right? Analysis people that I want to show them, hey, you gotta learn some of these basic tools. And I have a whole program created specifically for people that don't want to get into the woo-woo. You don't want to be a professional healer. You don't need to know all the ins and outs. It's like they say, some people just want to drive the car, others want to know how the engine works. I can do both. So on one hand, for people that want to go really deep into the metaphysical aspect and the woo-woo, if you want to be a healer like me, I can teach you that. But I also work with a lot of people like lawyers, doctors, investors, financial planners, day traders that are curious and realize that there's a huge advantage here. And I think that's part of the divine plan, that when more people wake up as to how powerful this stuff can be to help you with your life, to make more money, to be happier, then it's going to get more widespread.
Hell yes.
And that's part of why I'm here. I'm here as part of that interface.
Yeah.
There is a class of people, maybe like your husband, that might be willing to listen to me, at least for a short time.
Oh yeah, you're so logical. He'd eat
Whereas
shit
someone
up.
that shows up as all woo-woo, they may just shut him right down.
Oh, he would
So,
eat your shit up for
yep.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He loves
Yeah. So when I teach,
analytical
it is
stuff.
fast paced. There's no, we tell you the same thing 19 times over 6 hours.
Good.
It's like, here's the teaching. Boom. Everyone get it? Questions. All right. Next. Here's the next teaching. Boom.
So you're talking about online though, right? Like
Yes.
Zoom?
I
Okay.
do almost everything online now. I do almost everything online through Zoom. Though about twice a year, I have residential intensives, but those are invite only. So for the people that are working with me at the higher levels, we do get together physically in groups because there are things you got to be in a room to do. Even with all of our electronic wizardry in 2025, there is some magic. There are certain things you got to be shoulder to shoulder with people to do.
Oh yeah.
But
It's definitely the energy is way more intense when when you're that close in someone's energetic field.
Yes. Typically, I work with most of my private session clients online remotely.
Uh-huh.
I will typically only see them when they happen to be in Vegas.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to working with people in a
I
room.
do all my stuff online.
Yeah,
Yes.
but almost everything's done online now.
Well, I have enjoyed this conversation
Likewise.
immensely. Please let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your
Sure.
offerings.
So the best place to look me up is go to my website, which is awakeningdynamics.com. So just put awakeningdynamics.com into your browser. And you could also Google my name, put in Brent Michael Phillips, and it should come right up. What I have on the website there, one is there's a link to my YouTube channel. It's a great way for those that want to learn more. Got a couple hundred videos on the channel. I also have a link to the upcoming events. So if you wanted to join us for the movement group, which again, I only do a public event once a month, usually the first Monday, everyone is welcome to sign up and join us. And I have a special offer for people that really resonate with this. And I'm going to ask, please only take advantage of this if this really resonates with you, if you think I'm the right person for you. That anybody that's interested, I will do a free 20-minute get to know you call where you kind of tell me where you're at in your life, what your most important goals and challenges are. And I will either, if I feel you're a good fit, I can give you a sense of how we might work together. And if you're not a good fit, which is probably a little more than half the time, I will give you a personal referral to someone that I think would be a better match for where you're at. And so that's open to anybody, but I'll ask, only take advantage of it if you think that this might really resonate with you. If you go, hey, I really like Brent's approach, I might want to go deep here. If that's the case, happy to talk to you, get a sense of what you're about. Because, let's just say I'm way too old to be wasting my time working with people that aren't going to get a lot of benefit.
Yes, that
And I've
sounds
gotten
true.
pretty good at weeding them out. And it's nothing personal
No, I
at
say the
all.
same
Yeah,
thing.
it's nothing personal at
For
all.
me, when I don't work with anyone unless they're absolutely 100% ready to shift, because like you
Yeah.
said, it's not easy.
Right. I don't want to spend my time. I don't want to take your money.
Yeah.
But for those that are really called to this can be truly life-changing.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on, sharing your heart, sharing all your history, how you came into this. I know for me, every time I share a little bit of my story, it helps me heal on some
Mhm.
level. And so I thank you so much for coming on and giving us a
Mhm.
piece of your heart. There's like a slight delay that's weird. Um, it just keeps like, anyways. Um, but yes, may you find all the divine souls that are ready to shift into the next level of their life path and their timeline. And thank you so much for doing what you do. You are a
Excited to be
gift.
here. This is
You're
great.
a gift to the
Keep it up.
world. Yeah, thank you.